trade deal with the United States yesterday. Apologies for that, but we move over to the Middle East for our next story, where according to local media reports, all eyes are now on Hamas as pressure mounts for the group to respond to a major ceasefire and hostage release deal. Israel has already agreed to the proposal brokered by Qatar and based on a framework shaped by U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. Under the deal, Hamas would release 10 Israeli hostages, 8 immediately and 2 after 50 days, and return of the bodies of 18 others. In exchange, a 60-day ceasefire would begin, with negotiations for a long-term end to the war taking place during that window. According to local and international reports, this is the first time there is real hope Hamas will say yes. Qatar is applying intense pressure, pushing Hamas to accept the deal and move forward diplomacy. Israel's foreign minister says the government is serious about peace. The world now waits for Hamas's answer, a decision that could shift the course of the war. We now move to a related development where former Hamas hostage Edan Alexander is set to meet U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington on Thursday, nearly 2 months after his release from captivity in Gaza. The 21-year-old dual U.S. Israeli citizen was freed on May the 12th after spending 584 days in Hamas custody, kidnapped during the October the 7th attack on his IDF base. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that both the President and First Lady Melania Trump will welcome Alexander and his family in the Oval Office. The meeting comes just days before Trump's planned talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he's expected to push for an end to the Gaza war. Unlike other hostage releases, Alexander's freedom was not part of a ceasefire or prisoner swap. Hamas called it a goodwill gesture to Trump in hopes of a broader deal. Alexander, who grew up in New Jersey, returned to the US last month and has been recovering with his family since. We're once again joined by Scott Faulkner to discuss these developments in further detail. Scott, let's start with the most pressing issue, the possibility of an agreed ceasefire by Hamas. We have seen a ceasefire before, it didn't hold. We know that Hamas wants a permanent end to the war. This deal, however, is a 60-day pause in fighting. If Hamas does accept this deal right now, does it really open the door to lasting peace or just pause the fighting?
Reports that I'm picking up through my Middle East contacts that there is a bigger deal in the works, and that is where a consortium of Arab countries will actually take over running the Gaza Strip, and Hamas will be removed as a political entity in that part of basically the province or district of Gaza. If that happens, then we could have a real lasting peace, because at that point you're then looking at rational people instead of the fanatics of Hamas, looking after the well-being of their people, of the people in the Gaza Strip, and possibly looking at how do you economically develop the area in a meaningful way, as opposed to diverting aid dollars to basically train fighters and dig tunnels. So that is lurking behind the scenes, and I think part of Qatar and some of the other Arab states are trying to put tremendous pressure on Hamas to say, okay, let's do the ceasefire as an interim move. Let's get these hostages, because Israel's under a lot of domestic pressure to finally get all the hostages home. But let's look at a lasting solution, and a lasting solution is basically removing Hamas from the scene.
Yes, and Scott, we know that Donald Trump-Netanyahu meeting is coming up later this week. Donald Trump is expected to exert pressure on the Israeli Prime Minister. Of course, critics claim that Benjamin Netanyahu does not want an end to this war. We know that he is in a coalition government with this far-right party who have threatened to leave if the war ends. We've also seen Donald Trump call for the end of Netanyahu's corruption trial. Do you think Donald Trump has the power to exert enough pressure on Netanyahu for Israel to end this war now, which is entering its 21st month? What are your thoughts?
I think, again, pressure is, again, probably a strong term. I think the key is that on one front, continuing to arm Israel to bring additional anti-missile technology to the region so that the civilian, if Iran or the Houthis or anyone else start to launch additional missiles, that they're being interdicted. But the other piece of the puzzle is, if my sources are correct, that that there's this bigger concept in the works, that may be the better leverage with the government, is to say, let's do this interim step, let's bring in this bigger solution, and an interim step will pave the way for this much bigger solution. So I think, is that pressure? Yes, on one front, but I think part of it is looking at the next chess moves and keeping the Israeli government apprised that there really is a solution to this. There really is a way out, and it's going to be a much broader set of players than just the U.S. and Israel.
That was Scott Faulkner, head of Eagle Enterprises. Thank you very much, Scott, for joining us on the program. We now move on to our next story, where China's top diplomat